It was a cold afternoon in early winter. The sky was grey. The wind was strong. I walked home after work, tired and quiet. Then I heard a sound. It was a small, weak cry. Meow. I stopped. No, it was not a cat. The sound came again. Whimper, whimper. It was so soft, but it went straight to my heart. I looked around and saw a small paper box near a trash bin. I walked closer and bent down. Inside the box was a tiny puppy. Its fur was dirty, and its eyes were half closed. It was shaking, trying to lift its head. "Oh no," I whispered. The puppy looked at me. Its eyes were wet and sad. That look made my heart ache. I slowly reached out my hand. "Hey, little one," I said softly. "Don't be afraid." It did not move. I could see its ribs. It was too thin. Rain started to fall. The wind blew harder. I looked at the puppy again. It needed help. I could not leave it there. I took off my scarf and wrapped the puppy inside. It was so small, so light. I could feel its weak heartbeat. I held it close and ran to the nearest animal clinic. The vet looked at the puppy and sighed. "It's very weak," she said, "maybe 2 or 3 weeks old." "Can it live?" I asked. My voice shook a little. The vet smiled gently. "It can, if someone takes care of it." I nodded. "I'll do it." She gave me some medicine and milk powder. I paid the bill with my cold hands, then looked down at the puppy. It was sleeping in my scarf now. At home, I made a small bed using an old towel and a box. The puppy lay down quietly. I watched it breathe, slowly, gently. For some reason, my eyes became wet. I thought about how lonely my apartment always felt. No sound, no light, no warmth. But now, this little thing was here. It made a tiny sound while dreaming. It was alive. It was with me. I smiled. "Your name is Lucky," I said. The puppy moved its ear, as if it heard me. "Lucky," I said again, and touched its paw. "You will be fine." That night, I could not sleep. I kept checking if Lucky was breathing. I was afraid to lose it, even though we just met. At 3 a.m., Lucky woke up and cried softly. I warmed the milk and fed it with a spoon. It was slow, but it tried. When it finally stopped crying, it looked up at me with sleepy eyes. Something warm filled my heart. It was a strange feeling, soft and strong at the same time. I realized I was smiling again. I whispered, "Don't worry, Lucky. I'm here." Then, for the first time in a long while, I didn't feel alone anymore. The first morning with Lucky was quiet and slow. I woke up early. The sky outside was still grey. I looked into the box beside my bed. Lucky was sleeping, his tiny body rising and falling. For a moment, I just watched him breathe. When he opened his eyes, I smiled. "Good morning, Lucky," I said. He didn't move. He just looked at me, unsure. "It's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." I mixed some milk powder and warm water. He smelled it and took a few small licks. Then he turned away. I tried again, holding the spoon near his mouth. He finally drank a little. I laughed softly. "You're so strong," I said. "Good boy." After eating, he tried to stand but fell again. His legs were weak, but he didn't give up. I put my hands around him, helping him balance. Step by step, he moved a little. He looked at me as if asking, "Did I do it right?" "Yes," I said, smiling. "You did great." Each day was the same and yet different. I came home from work and cleaned his box. I washed his fur with warm water and dried him with a towel. At first he hated it. He would cry and try to escape. I said softly, "It's okay, Lucky. I'm not hurting you." After a few days, he stopped crying. He started to wait for me at the door when I came home. His tail wagged when he saw me. That sound, the little thump of his tail, filled the room with life. Sometimes when I sat on the floor, he came close and sat near my leg. Not too close, but close enough to feel my warmth. He would look at me, then rest his head on my knee. I could feel his trust, slow but growing. One night I came home later than usual. It was raining outside, and I was tired. When I opened the door, I heard soft whining. Lucky was sitting by the door, waiting. When he saw me, he barked for the first time. It was a tiny bark, short and sweet. I laughed. "Were you waiting for me?" He wagged his tail so fast that his body shook. I picked him up and hugged him. His fur smelled like milk and soap. "I'm home," I said. He licked my hand, and I felt something warm in my chest. That night I lay in bed and thought about him. I remembered the first day I found him, cold and weak in the box. Now he could stand, he could bark, he could smile. Yes, dogs can smile. I was sure of it. I whispered into the dark, "Lucky, you're getting better. And maybe, so am I." He made a soft sound in his sleep, like a sigh. I closed my eyes, listening to the rain and his breathing. For the first time in months, I felt peace. No loneliness, no emptiness. Just this small heartbeat beside me, reminding me that love was still real. The rain came one evening without warning. The sound of drops hit my window again and again. I sat on the floor with Lucky beside me. He watched the rain too, his head a little tilted. I smiled. "You like the sound, don't you?" He wagged his tail and rested his head on my lap. The room was warm, but the rain made me think of the past. 2 years ago, I also had a dog. Her name was Daisy. She was soft, white, and full of energy. My boyfriend and I raised her together. We were happy then, or at least I thought we were. One winter, Daisy got sick. She stopped eating. We tried everything, but she didn't get better. When she died, the house felt empty. And so did my heart. After that, he left me. He said he couldn't stay because everything reminded him of Daisy. He said he needed to move on. But I couldn't move on. I stayed. I stayed with the silence, with the pain, with the photos of Daisy. Since then, I told myself, no more pets, no more love. Because love always leaves. A small sound pulled me back to now. Lucky was looking at me. His eyes were full of warmth. He made a tiny sound, like he could feel my sadness. I touched his head. "You're different, Lucky," I said softly. "You came when my heart was closed." He licked my fingers. His tongue was warm and real. I smiled through my tears. Maybe love doesn't always leave. Maybe sometimes it finds a new way back. The rain got heavier. Lightning flashed outside. Lucky barked once, then hid his head under my arm. "Don't be scared," I said, holding him close. "I'm here." He trembled a little but stayed. As I held him, I felt something inside me soften. For a long time I thought healing meant forgetting, but now I knew it means remembering without pain. That night I took out Daisy's photo from the drawer. She looked happy, running in the park. I placed the photo on my desk beside Lucky's small bed. "Now you're both here," I whispered. "My 2 friends." Lucky looked at the photo, then looked at me. I laughed softly. "Don't worry. You're not taking her place." He wagged his tail as if he understood. Before sleeping, I opened the window a little. The smell of rain came in, fresh, calm, alive. Lucky climbed into my lap again, already half asleep. I stroked his back gently. "You know, Lucky," I whispered, "maybe you didn't need saving. Maybe I did." He made a quiet sound, something between a sigh and a dream. Outside, the rain slowed down. Inside, my heart did too. For the first time in a long while, I felt not broken, but whole. It was a Sunday afternoon. The sun was bright, and the air felt soft. Lucky and I went to the small park near my home. He loved the park. He always ran in circles and chased butterflies. "Don't go too far," I called. He barked once and wagged his tail. I sat on a bench watching him run. He was fast now, strong, full of life. I smiled. I took out my phone to take a picture. For 1 second I looked down. When I looked up, Lucky was gone. "Lucky?" I called. No answer. I stood up and looked around. The park was quiet. My heart started to beat faster. "Lucky!" I shouted louder. Still nothing. I ran down the path, checking behind every tree. Maybe he ran after a bird. Maybe someone took him. The fear hit me hard. I could feel it in my chest. Tears came to my eyes. I asked people in the park, "Have you seen a small brown dog?" They shook their heads. I kept running, calling his name again and again. After an hour, the sun began to set. The park lights came on. I walked to the street outside, still shouting, "Lucky, where are you?" I checked under benches, behind cars, near the bushes. Nothing. I started to cry. In that moment, all the memories came back. The box on the street, the first night, the rain, his tiny bark. I thought, not again. I can't lose him too. I sat down on the wet ground, shaking. The world felt empty again. I whispered, "Please, Lucky, please come back." Then, in the distance, I heard it. A small, weak sound. Whimper, whimper. I jumped up and followed the sound. It came from under a parked car. I got down on my knees and looked. There he was, Lucky, dirty and scared, one paw stuck under the tire. "Oh my God," I said, "don't move, Lucky. I'm here." I crawled closer, tears falling on my hands. I lifted the tire gently, then pulled him out. He cried softly but licked my fingers. His leg was bleeding a little, but he was alive. I held him close to my chest. "Shh, it's okay," I whispered. "You're safe now." I ran all the way to the vet again. The doctor said it was only a small cut. "He'll be fine," she said. "He's lucky." I smiled through my tears. Yes, he really is. When we got home, I cleaned his paw and wrapped it in a small bandage. He lay in my arms, tired but calm. I kissed his head and said, "Don't run away again, okay?" He looked at me with sleepy eyes, then closed them. That night, I didn't turn off the lights. I kept watching him, afraid he might disappear again. He slept peacefully, breathing slowly. As I watched him, I realized something. I wasn't just scared of losing him. I was scared of losing love again. But love wasn't gone. It was right here, sleeping in my arms, with a small bandaged paw and a big heart. Spring came slowly that year. The air was warm, and the flowers started to bloom. Lucky's paw was healed now. He could run again, fast and free. Every morning we walked to the park together. He sniffed the grass, chased the birds, and barked at butterflies. I sat on the bench watching him. Sometimes I laughed out loud. A few people in the park knew him now. They said, "He's such a happy dog." I smiled and said, "Yes, he really is." But deep inside, I knew he wasn't always this way. And neither was I. At home, his old box was gone. He now had a soft bed beside mine. Every night before sleeping, he walked in small circles, then lay down with a sigh, his tail brushing my blanket. Sometimes he put his paw on my hand before he slept. It felt like a promise, soft but strong. I always whispered, "Good night, Lucky." And he would wag his tail once, even half asleep. One night I looked around my room. It used to be silent and cold. Now there were toys on the floor, a bowl in the corner, and a leash hanging by the door. It looked like a home again. I thought about everything we had been through. The box on the street, the long nights, the rain, the day he got lost, the fear, the tears. But now all I could feel was gratitude. Lucky changed my days quietly. He didn't talk. He didn't ask questions. He just stayed. Through sadness, through silence. His love was simple, but it was enough. Sometimes I wondered if he remembered that cold day we met. Maybe he didn't, but I did. Every time I held him, I remembered the girl who found hope again that day. One weekend, we visited the beach. It was our first time there. Lucky ran along the shore, chasing the waves. He barked at the sea, fearless and wild. The sound of his joy mixed with the wind. I took off my shoes and walked to the water. The sea was cold but clear. Lucky came running back, wet and happy. He shook the water all over me, and I laughed. "You silly boy," I said. He barked and jumped again, his tail high in the air. In that moment, I realized he wasn't the only one who had healed. I had too. When the sun began to set, we sat together on the sand. The sky turned orange and soft pink. Lucky leaned against me, warm and calm. I stroked his back and whispered, "You saved me, Lucky." He looked up at me, eyes shining in the light. I smiled. "Yes," I said softly, "we saved each other." The waves came and went. The wind touched my face. Lucky closed his eyes and I closed mine too. For the first time in years, everything felt right. No pain, no fear, just peace and love. Simple, quiet, real.